Hey everybody, Samwise here, and it's time for another Herb of the Month video, and I'm so pleased to announce that this month's Herb of the Month is Elder, which I feel like I've been waiting to do because I want to honor this plant. It means a lot to me. It's really big in the lineage that I study the most of my lineages, which is the Germanic lineage. It's associated with some big earth goddess energy, earth sky goddess, Mother Hulda or Halle or Hulda, however you like to call her. And yeah, it's a really potent antiviral and really great for colds and flu specifically. Bigger viral stuff, I would use different tools and different plants, but for like your run-of-the-mill like cold and flu as a virus, I definitely turn to this plant at this time of the year when it's starting to get a little colder, when colds and flus start to run amok in my community. I always make sure that my household has a big old jar of elderberry oxymol that I make. Hopefully, I prefer fresh, but dried also works well. And we drink that from like a shot glass. We don't, we kind of drink it like a cordial or like an aperitif, not necessarily with the droppers, although you can totally use droppers. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the plant itself. It's a small tree. It's kind of like a bushy tree. It can grow to be tall, definitely taller than me. So 5 foot, 5-ish human. And yeah, it can kind of branch out and be thickety. It kind of has these like long tapered leaves and has these really gorgeous umbels of flowers that are like cream or white colored, and they have this really beautiful like magical floral scent. And then those turn into like clusters of berries. And the ones that I'm familiar with are, there's black elder and there's blue elder. And there's also a red elder that we don't eat, and we don't use that for medicine. That one's toxic. But the blue elder you can identify by the berries, the blue and the black, because the black elder berries will appear blackish and the blue berries will appear bluish, mostly because they have this like beautiful luminescent like bluish, grayish, whitish natural yeast that grows on the outside of the berries. Makes them a little bit dusty and just like really pleasant to like touch and eat. And yeah, in my lineage and in many lineages, the elder tree is considered a gateway to the spirit realm or the underworld. Depends on where you're going in your spirit lineage. And I was taught that it's always very important to, if you're harvesting from elder, to offer an offering to that tree first and to ask permission from the elder tree, lest there be consequences. And consequences could include fairy beings, land spirit beings, however you want to call them, stealing away your harvest of your berries that you just worked hard to harvest, or stealing away you into another realm. So I really like to approach this elder with respect and with reverence. And yeah, I've really created a generative relationship with this plant over the years, where I learn a lot from this being and I get a lot from the medicine, and I feel really honored to be able to give to it by way of respect or gifts. I was taught from my teachers in Ancestral Apothecary that elder really likes shiny things, like shiny ribbon, beautiful stones. There's, candy, but I don't really leave candy because it's the wrappers and things. But traditionally, or most recently, that has been an offering that folks have left, like ribbons, like decorating or adorning the tree, if it's a tree around my home space that I get to caretake, and of course asking permission if that's on somebody else's realm. Yeah, the whole tree is quite medicinal, and also there's parts of the tree, like the bark of the root, that do have medicine, but that I don't know how to use, so I won't really be talking about them. And in general, they're considered a purgative, which means it makes you vomit if you use it incorrectly, which sometimes if you eat something you shouldn't, that can be useful. But if you're trying to use it that way, then that's a conversation with your herbalist or your healthcare provider. Don't be doing that on your own. That can get a little tricky. So we're going to stick to talking about the berries and the flowers. The leaves as well, although I've not used the leaves directly myself, I've used the berries and the flowers the most. So that's where we'll be focusing because that feels a little safer to me. Yeah, so I'm pulling from some books. I'm using Medical Herbalism by David Hoffman, Herbal Medicine by Charles Kane, Herbal Medicine from the Heart of the Earth by Cheryl Tigner. And I'm also drawing from this book, Goddess Hale, which is by Garden Stone, which talks about that deity, Holda or Hale, and her association with elder. So yeah, a little bit more about the medicine of the plant. The leaf is considered a purgative, right? The blah, if you use it too much or inappropriately, or if you're using that for that purpose. If you use a small amount, right, and you know what you're doing and you're consulting with people who know what they're doing, the leaf can be used as an expectorant in tea. So let's say you have like an upper respiratory tract situation. It's very gummy and mucousy and you want some support getting that mucus out. The leaf is an expectorant, helping you expectorate that that sputum is what they call it, or mucus, the gloops. And it's also a vulnerary, so like a topical application, like on the skin, right, on the outside of the skin of the leaf, in like a salve, like an oil-based ointment, can be helpful in closing and decreasing infection of like shallow surface wounds, like scrapes. And yeah, the flower is, again, these like really beautiful umbels in the tree. They're very aromatic, which I like because they also have this diaphoretic action, which means to like support the body in cultivating fever, which we actually need when we're in the process of moving out a viral or bacterial infection. One of our body's natural immune defenses is to raise our body temperature, because the microbes, like a virus or a bacteria, usually only optimally function right at body temperature, like 98 degrees, 37 degrees Celsius. I'm taking a microbiology class, so it's like, it's right here. And so when our body raises that temperature, that's supporting the body to become an inhospitable environment for these microbes. So this flower of elder can help do that, and it kind of supports that fever in a way that helps move through, like up and through that fever in a natural way. And so we call that a diaphoretic. For that to be really effective, we like to use a really hot tea for a diaphoretic use of the elder flower. And that's supportive too for like moving that mucus like up and out, especially when you have, upper respiratory tract stuff happening. A really hot tea can feel really nice on the throat and be really supportive in opening these channels, making it easier for things to get up and out, and also support the body in becoming warmer so that we can support that temperature rise, and so that we can come down eventually too when the body's resolved the infection. That can happen in waves too. The fever can happen in waves. And so when that's happening, just kind of know that it can kind of go up and down and up and down. And that's part of the body's like pulsing of that fever. And if you're sweating a lot, that's totally okay. That's part of the diaphoretic quality of that, is like your body's like, and push out toxins and sweat and things. That's okay. And when you're kind of in between, fever waves, to not stay wet, to kind of like move the wet, if you're like in bed and you're like wearing a shirt or whatever and it gets wet, or like the sheets get wet, like change that and then kind of just keep staying dry, can be helpful. So moving on to the berry, again, it's antiviral, which is really great because, in allopathic medicine, there's not a lot that's very accessible to us in terms of broad spectrum antiviral medication. They have some specific antivirals, but not as many like, this is for this whole category of like viruses that we can encounter on like a daily, day-to-day basis, like flu, right? That's why there's a vaccine instead of like more or less like treatment options. So yeah, that's changing and shifting all the time, but the berry has been pretty well studied as an antiviral, and it works for like cold and flu viral things. So again, that's diaphoretic, so it's helping to move that fever through. Something that I found in my research, which I've not used it this way, but this is, in these resources, these texts I mentioned, the berry can be like anti-rheumatic. So that means like sometimes when we get like a viral sick, our joints can hurt and be achy. And so it can be helpful for that pain, this like slight inflammation of the joints. Not in like a necessarily, I haven't seen any studies correlating it to like arthritis, which is kind of a similar inflammation, but for different reasons. So yeah, but in the terms of like sickness and stuff, it can be useful for that. Similarly, like nerve pain can be helpful with those kind of symptoms of these kind of viruses. So yeah, and the berry itself is used in like a tincture, or like I said, the oxymol is my favorite way, which is apple cider vinegar and honey as a preparation of the fresh berry, although the dried berry works well too. It can really shorten flu expressions in the body. So like kind of bringing it down to 3 or 4 days instead of stretching out for 2 weeks, which can be really helpful. And yeah, it combines well with other antiviral plants like echinacea. Usually that's literally what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, and I've noticed this to be really effective, to have like relatively high doses of both echinacea and of elder right at the beginning, like right as I notice I'm starting to get sick. I like feel the tickle, I'm feeling a little worn down. I'm like, okay, like hit it with the elder, hit it with the echinacea. And by high dosage, I mean like if I'm using droppers, like 4 to 6 dropperfuls of each plant. Or if I'm using like a shot glass or like a small mug for the elder, specifically, I'll like fill up like 1 inch or 2 of the small mug or like a shot glass and then drink that. And that will usually, if I catch it in the beginning, it will curtail it so that it doesn't even get to like a full expression of like full on like cold or flu. And so, yeah, I find that it really is helpful in the beginning of those. And it can still be helpful if you catch it in the middle, less so at the end, although it can still be supportive. I really feel like it shines in the beginning with those higher dosages. Look at my notes. When you're making things with elderberry, it's important to strain the seeds out because the seeds have some not so great components, similar to like apple seeds. I'm forgetting exactly which component you don't want to eat, but sometimes they can be like slightly upsetting to the gastrointestinal tract. So strain out the seeds. And I've heard different things from different folks around like, oh, you need to cook the berries in order to make medicine. And I don't find that that's true. I can totally make an oxymol with the fresh berry. The important thing is that I strain out the seeds after it's like macerated or sit there for a month. I use like a fine mesh to strain out the seeds, and me and my community have been happy with that for years and years. So just strain out the seeds. And lastly, elder makes like some really amazing foods, and it's a tasty berry. It's like, there's a reason why like kids like it, although they shouldn't eat too many of the raw berries. The apple cider and the honey do something such that it makes it okay to like ingest. But yeah, I wouldn't eat a ton of the raw berries by themselves, but they make really tasty foods like elderberry compote or like a mush, kind of like cranberry sauce might be. Makes a tasty jam. There's different preparations that are traditional in the Germanic lineage that I come from, of like challah donuts. So you can like fry, like dip the flour umbels in batter and fry them, which I've not tried, but I want to. And elder wine and elder syrup. So those are some ideas of ways to use this plant. Right now, the tree has done flowered and berried, and so we're really at the point of the year where I'm using the syrup, I'm using the medicine that I made earlier in the year, or I'm making stuff from the dried berries. and that's a blessing too. So I encourage you to get down with some elder and stay tuned for some medicine making stuff later this month.